were living under a rock and somehow ignored all news and social media this week, the FCC voted to repeal Obama's net neutrality regulations on Thursday. It spawned an outcry of apocalyptic rage all over the internet, with some arguments more valid than others. Regardless of your stance on the issue, it is not an end to the internet, as CNN claims. The internet did, in fact, exist and even flourished before Obama's net neutrality rules.
Fact.
Regardless of your stance on the issue, we can also probably agree that it is not a ruling that unfairly targets the LGBT community or women specifically. There is probably not going to be a sudden and drastic rise in suicide rates because Google is specifically charging gay youth and budding feminists $2 per Google search, or because Twitter is charging them 99 cents per tweet, or because Comcast is completely blacklisting Tumblr, cutting them off from their communities and friends. Though I'd be kind of okay if they really did blacklist Tumblr. But that's exactly what LGBT and feminist activist groups are claiming. According to Out and Advocate, two LGBT publications, the FCC's vote means that internet companies will now start blocking or charging extra for gay porno sites, gay dating apps, HIV information websites, and television shows with queer characters. So you can just kiss Will and Grace goodbye? The proof is in the pudding, claiming that, wait for it, YouTube's demonetization and age restriction of the author's pro-LGBT videos are proof that the internet service providers are going to discriminate against minorities. Even though Google is not an internet service provider, and tons of conservative, libertarian, and gun channels have fallen the same fate.
Fact.
Several LGBT activists also claim that major internet providers have been consistently targeting the LGBT community with only the government to stop them. And now that the government is out of the way, their communities will be destroyed forever. The vote doesn't actually mean the government is out of the internet. It means that the FCC is giving responsibility of regulating all of this to a different part of the government, the Federal Trade Commission. The government is still going to be there loud and clear, regulating the internet as an information service rather than a telecommunications service, and requiring internet service providers to be transparent about their dealings. Like it or not, the government is still very much in the internet. Never mind that nearly every major recognizable brand in America celebrated Gay Pride Month this year, and have for years. Never mind that Comcast provided a week-long free view of award-winning LGBT programming during Pride. Never mind that Verizon has a whole page on their official website dedicated to pro-LGBT advocacy, or that AT&T partnered with GLAAD for their 5th annual Live Proud campaign, or that LGBT issues have reached into pretty much every corner of the media. Realistically, if Comcast or Verizon or AT&T were to suddenly try and take all of that away, 1, they wouldn't be very successful, 2, they'd have to backpedal all their past years of LGBT support, and 3, they wouldn't be able to do it without riots in the streets. The public backlash would be insane. I mean, someone can't even decide not to bake a cake without being shunned by half of society. But to publication into, this means that HIV information will no longer be available to queer youth because internet content will now be, quote, vetted by a conservative-leaning, abstinence-only board. Who is this board that's going to single-handedly decide all the content on the internet? And how do we know they're abstinent conservatives? 4 of the first 6 Google results for HIV are government websites. Is this secret board going to take down the government? Well, in that case, count me in. But the Center for Media Justice argues that the repeal isn't an attack on LGBT people because it's actually an attack on women. You see, without net neutrality, women will no longer be able to bypass traditional patriarchal gatekeepers in media, and women will now face a heightened level of online discrimination and censorship. After all, without net neutrality, a Hawaiian grandmother wouldn't have been able to single-handedly organize the Women's March on Facebook, or at least that's the argument. According to the center, the Me Too social media storm also could never have happened without net neutrality, even though the actual Me Too campaign started over 10 years ago, again, long before net neutrality rules. A piece over at Refinery 29 argues that women will now go hungry because 90% of Etsy sellers are women, and apparently Etsy's just going down with the ship. Heaven forbid people might have to start paying rent for their Etsy shop the way I have to pay rent for my office space for my own business. Women-owned businesses grew by 45% from 2007 to 2016, but the writers argue that it was only because net neutrality rules allowed them to, even though net neutrality rules only actually existed for 2 of those years. The women themselves had nothing to do with it. It was all internet.
If you got a business, that you didn't build that.
Oh, okay. I feel like I need to point out here that YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook are media giants. They're not suddenly going to disappear because of this ruling. They might be required to pay more to internet providers because of the amount of data and bandwidth they take up, but these companies make billions of dollars a year. They'll be able to afford it. And just because internet providers can charge more for faster service or create tiered internet packages or charge some platforms more than others, doesn't mean that they will. If a provider did decide to discriminate against an entire group, say women or gay people, most women and gay people would probably try to find service elsewhere. Or another company would pop up offering fairer treatment, and then the company discriminating would lose tons of money and get a reputation for being an asshole. Economics. But every single one of these arguments is entirely hypothetical because Congress has the power to overturn the decision anytime in the next 60 days, and it seems like the vast majority of people oppose the repeal. Several lawmakers have already announced they plan to introduce resolutions against the decision, and others have already filed lawsuits against the FCC. Interestingly, in 2015, 40 civil rights organizations signed a letter to repeal net neutrality rules. They argued that net neutrality would actually hurt minorities and low-income communities by raising prices and by scaring away competition and innovation in internet services because of overregulation. Many economists were against it for the same reason. And according to Forbes and studies by US Telecom and PPI, those predictions did come true. But if nothing else, at least FCC Chair Ajit Pai gave us this gem of 7 things you can still do after the repeal. A video which, ironically, pro-net neutrality supporters are attempting to take down with copyright law. That is your Liberty-related news of the week. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you really like my videos and want to help support my channel, you can do so over on Patreon or with a one-time donation through PayPal or Bitcoin. Until next week, thanks for watching and helping me to spread the message of liberty.